Oh, look at that. Bruce, let me show you something here.
What do you got?
All right. So it's water, right?
Whoa.
Look at
What the
that.
fuck is that?
Right. Exactly.
Milk?
It's magic.
Wow.
Magic.
It's the elixir.
That looks
Exactly.
pretty insane.
That looks rancid.
I didn't like that.
I think it's spoiled.
It's pretty good. It tastes like aniseed, basically. Like licorice.
Oh, I hate licorice.
You hate licorice.
I'm drinking
I
water
don't like
because I
licorice.
need to keep my wits about me because it's draft season and you guys are going to be making bad decisions. And I'm going to
Mike, can you
clear
kick us
head.
off? Can you kick us off with your takes on this Dolphins reporting about them potentially trading up to 3 as a
speaking
tackle?
of bad
fraudulent
decisions.
report. Rappaport got fed a fraudulent report from a GM. There's no doubt in my mind because
What was it?
it's that they want to move up. The Dolphins want to move up from 5 to 3 to draft their top offensive tackle in a class with like 5 guys that could start right away for you. So
It's not
That's
like he's not
ridiculous.
evaluating source. He's just repeating what's told to him, regardless of who tells it to him.
yes. So
What's the
He's just
point,
repeating
though?
that.
What are they trying to get
they
accomplished?
want to move
here?
up for a quarterback, but they want it to be known actually, that's a great question about what they want, but I think they want to move up for a quarterback.
Yeah, and they don't want whoever the Chargers or whatever going to 2.
Or they don't want the Lions thinking
Ah.
that they are desperate for a quarterback. And
Right.
if it's like offensive tackle, they might have to give up less.
I think that's why they're doing all the Herbert talk. I think they're trying to get Miami to not move up.
But I don't think it's coincidental that, I mean, you heard Dale Jeremiah said that the Giants are locking in on Jedrick Wills on his media conference call. And then now you see that the Dolphins want to get ahead of the Giants. Maybe they're eyeing Wills. I don't know. I mean, it just feels weird that you'd report something completely
The Giants are
fraudulent.
just playing the part of the useful mark again, aren't they? Like they're just the pawn in the Dolphins scheme here.
Every insane thing with the Dolphins has come out in the last week. Right up until that, it was Tua, the end. Right? Every lunatic thing that's come out, whether it's Herbert or the tackle at 3, it's all come out just before the draft.
I think the Herbert stuff's real. I think the Herbert stuff that came out a few weeks ago, and it came out subtly that hey, maybe teams are a little bit lower on Tua because of the injuries. I think the Herbert stuff's real. The rest of it's all fake.
I
It
think
was the Miami
that's-
Herald that reported the Tua injury, which
and the Palm Beach Post. And I
Yeah.
feel like those two
They
sources
got
are
it leaked
obviously
from
driving
inside the building.
down the Tua stuff. I mean, yeah, I agree with Mike there.
I'm totally into. I think they're taking
the
Tua.
person that gets suckered in by all the smoke screen.
I'm suckered.
They don't want to be the Chicago Bears. That's what they don't want to be. Trade up for no apparent reason.
Mitch Trubisky? What do you mean?
I mean,
Bruce, give us your take on Mitch Trubisky. Everyone knows PFF's take. You're new to PFF. What's your take on Mitch Trubisky, Bruce?
Oh, I mean,
Go ahead. I want to hear this.
no, you go ahead, boss man. I want to hear.
No.
you.
I'm giving it 1,000 times over. Go for it.
No, I mean, Trubisky, we all see it. He's athletic. He can make plays with his feet, but he can't even hit an open target. And that's what's so concerning is, even last year you see key third downs to keep drives alive, and he's just missing throws. And, so his accuracy is a major issue. And he's just not the guy. That's why I kind of get frustrated when you hear the Justin Herbert talk. I mean, I think, if you're Miami and you have 3 first-round draft picks, you got to go for Tua. I just think his play on the field shows it. And I know it's kind of risky with his injury. I don't even think it's the hip as much as it's just, is he going to, get hurt every year for us? But I just, and I worry about his arm strength. I do, but I think he has enough. He can make every throw, and his instinctual play I like. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of Trubisky. I like 2 of the Dolphins. I think they're crazy if they don't go that route.
Do you like
Dan
Trubisky?
Marino arm?
Stop.
Dan
Dilfer
Marino's
clarified. He didn't want to compare him necessarily to Marino or Rodgers. They just happened to be in the same sentence, wrapped around, throws as well as.
So, George,
Chill out.
George, we had Dilfer on NFL radio last week.
Yeah.
And we asked him that. We said, was it a comparison? What exactly was that? And he said, look, I worked out I was with Aaron Rodgers when he came out, and Tua spins it better than him. at that time, at this time. And he's like, and that's what I meant. And so for where Tua is at right now, he spins it the way it comes out better. And look, we see it on film. I mean, that was my concern during the season is his lack of arm strength and even accuracy. Everyone's hyping his accuracy, but I feel like in tight man-to-man coverage, I do have some concerns of that. And maybe it's just because of the lack of the arm strength. But as an overall picture, I think he has enough arm strength to get it done.
I mean, aside from injuries, there's like one concern about Tua, right? The fact that he played with what is probably going to be 4 NFL wide receivers almost the entire time he was at Alabama. Peter was on our show. He said, where would Devontae Parker be on that receiving totem pole in Alabama? Would he be first? Would he be second, third, or fourth? That's really the only question, right? Is because he's accurate. He makes good decisions. He graded well for us longer than Joe Burrow did. The only question is how much do you downgrade him for throwing to what has been, a lot of wide open players?
Well, how about Joe Burrow on that list?
True.
Right.
No, that's very true.
3 first-round tackles.
I mean, you've got to make how many times have we seen Mitch Trubisky's a great example of this? Guys wide open and he airmails them.
Yeah.
Receivers still get open in the NFL, and the only difference I think is it happens a little less and it's a little tighter. But it makes it that much more important that you hit every one of those throws.
Yeah.
So if you see a guy who's not being accurate on those open throws, you have no shot, right? That's why the Bears have no shot and they got Nick Foles.
And why Herbert probably doesn't have a very good shot of being any good, because he was, if you look at his he per play adjusted for stuff, basically who he played, situation, he made more negatively graded throws than the average college quarterback over the past 2 or 3 years. So, Tua has all these questions. Herbert is not the alternative to him, though, in my estimation.
Well, Mike, I'd like to hear how you study these things, and Bruce too, because I mean, so you can go to the highlight reel, right, and put anybody in the Hall of Fame. I mean, literally anybody can go in the Hall of Fame. So now you have to watch a cross section. So our graded plays are a great way for me to do that, right? So you see good plays, you see bad plays, you see the whole thing. Then you want to see a game or 2 or 3, right, so that you're actually seeing the sequence of when are they letting him throw? How does he do on third down? It's like, how do you guys do it?
Well, I think with quarterback, with how valuable it is, you got to watch all his plays. You got to watch it all. You're pretty much any top competition that he goes against to see basically just the offense he's in, what it looks like, and how it suits basically his strengths and weaknesses. 2, just the poise of playing the position. Because the data can tell you accuracy, the data can tell you consistency, but it can't tell you what a guy looks like there out on the football field and how the defenses look like and what the offense looks like around him.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, Steve, it was like when we initially talked way back and we're talking about in rhythm type throws, that's what I'd start looking at. And then Renner, you and I talked last week because it was interesting to me when I was diving into this of the uncatchable, inaccurate throws. And I put the filter. He was in rhythm. The throw was 10 to 19 yards downfield, and the receiver had at least separation. He was open, or the defender was closing. So basically, it's a throw you should hit. And what really stood out to me, of course, Burrow's number 1 with the least amount of uncatchable, inaccurate throws at 4.7%. And then you got Jalen Hurts at number 2 in 5% range. And then you got Love all the way down the board at 23%. So those were the kind of things that stood out to me. Man, these dudes are missing throws that you should hit, and they're not even catchable. It's catchable inaccurate. It's uncatchable inaccurate. And that's what stood out to me about Jalen Hurts, because I started being more of a fan of his as I watched him more, as I watched the Senior Bowl, as I watched the Combine, as I watched his pro day. And then what gets me is the stuff you don't see on statistics, right? It's the adversity he went through. You got benched in the national championship game. What kind of ding does that put on your ego, And for him to come back from that, excel in 2 different top college programs, I really like the mentality of guys, and that's kind of why I like Hurts in this draft a little bit because of the mentality issue. And I don't think a guy like Herbert kind of brings that to the locker room.
Hey, Bruce, question. So we go on and on about how important accuracy is. Guy comes into the NFL and he's inaccurate. What do you go through to get more accurate? What are teams going to do to help a guy get more accurate? And have you ever seen it work?
Well, I think, I mean, I think they are what they are. But when you come into the NFL, that's why I like watching Tua and Burrow, right? Because you see them operating NFL concepts, and they're operating with the right footwork and timing and rhythm to make those plays happen. And we showed Tua earlier today, and he's going through progressions. His feet are lined up. So when you have a guy, like Justin Herbert, that kind of, maybe wasn't in that kind of system, and now you kind of teach him how, your footwork matches up with these routes, and this is how it's all tied in together. They can get better. I don't know if they can get that much better, but I think that's a little way to kind of, once you learn, oh, shoot, that's why, Herbert missed a throw on a bench route, an 18 to 20-yard route, out route, and usually in the shotgun, you're going to take 5 steps, 1 hitch, and throw it to the sideline, 2 yards from the sideline, 18 to 20 yards downfield. He took 3 steps from the shotgun and then threw it, and it was behind the receiver. And a lot of times as a quarterback, if you take a shorter drop on a deeper route, you feel like you're holding the ball longer, and so you tend to just want to get out of your hands, and that's what causes some inaccuracy. So I think he can get better, but it's not going to be, what you see on film is kind of like what you're going to get. And, Steve and I talked about that, last year, right? I mean, where kind of you got to trust how these guys are grading at the next level. They're not going to steer too far from that.
I tell you, nobody watches more of the quarterback stuff than Steve. Nice job today, by the way, with Mike Tirico. That was good, Steve. Give us a little bit of some idea now. I'm with Bruce about Tua and his footwork. I think he comes into the NFL in the top 5 in quickness. As far as getting his feet set, I like sort of his frenetic pace of making decisions, of getting from different looks. But if he's that far down the list on the accuracy thing, I mean, how big of a knock is this for not Tua, but for Herbert? He's the one that now has all of a sudden skyrocketed up everybody's boards, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I always keep saying, too, if the first thing that you mentioned with the quarterback, if it's his size and his arm, then you're covering up for something. This is the same thing we went through with Josh Allen a couple of years ago as well, where it's oh, he's 6'6", he's got a big arm. Okay, what's the rest of the stuff? So all of the concerns that you guys brought up about Herbert, they're all valid, plus the fact that he looked really good as a freshman and as a sophomore and never really developed. I'm more concerned about that as much as anything as well, because he looked like an intriguing prospect early in his career, never really took the next step. And then just from a pure inaccuracy standpoint, when you compare him to all the other quarterbacks that we have data on going from college to the NFL, he's 34th out of 40 in just negatively graded throws as far as avoiding them. So that stuff generally stays consistent. So it's a big concern. And the two things that we've seen from guys that were not accurate in our numbers recently, though, is Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. Now, Lamar offsets that by having such a special skill set. He has way more open throws, and he doesn't have to be pinpoint. And he did improve just a little bit last year, accuracy-wise. And then with Josh Allen, you had a very conservative offense in Buffalo, and he didn't hit a throw beyond 20 yards where he's supposed to win. So there's just so many what-ifs. If you want to make Herbert accurate, make him throw 1 to 10 yards all the time. He'll complete more passes, but he's not going to get a whole bunch of catch and run opportunities because he's not exactly pinpoint. And Tua reminds me a lot of Jimmy G with that quick release and, getting through his progressions.
Your ceiling's limited when you have to confine an offense the way the Bills did with Josh Allen, because you get into a game like the playoffs against Houston or against New England a couple times where you actually have to make a throw under duress, not in rhythm, all that kind of stuff. And when your team really needs you to, not when you're out ahead. And that's where you sort of see the limitations there. And another point you made, Steve, which is great, is that Josh Allen was another player who was better early in his career than he was his last year. Jordan Love is another player who was better in 18 than he was 19. Herbert's the same. One of the answers to the question is why is so many people high on Love and Herbert, for example? Well, they had that opinion going into the season, and there's an anchor that's significant with respect to evaluation, where if you tried to plant the flag on a player early and he did not progress, you still sort of anchor to that position a little too much.
That's such a good point. I would think of it this way, because everyone has gone from college to the pros in some way, right? And a lot of us, unlike a few of us here, have not gone to the NFL. But we've all gone from, hey, I was a college student, to now I'm trying to figure out life as a normal human being as a professional. And you can't change that much. Like, you can try and say, oh, I'm going to do all these things better and better and better, but you just have so much you got to do just to keep your head above water. And to me, that's kind of the same thing with the quarterback position. You have to learn all of these things. You've got to try and be a leader. How are you going to go back and fix one of these fundamental issues when you're trying to gain all of these other pieces as well? There's a reason that accuracy at the college level translates best out of all of these things, right? Arm strength is not the thing that translates best. It's, are you accurate or not? And there's a reason for that.
Accuracy is a down payment on offense. If you can't pay your rent on offense, then you can't make the big plays, right? If you accuracy is just the given that a lot of quarterbacks have. And it's why, the Patriots with Brady, the Chiefs with Mahomes, they never score, 6 points a game, because they just have that down payment of accuracy. And when you don't have that, things can go really poorly really quickly.
Let's go back to Bruce for 1 minute about decision-making. How much does decision-making cause you concern? Because I keep hearing all this about Jordan Love, and I know he was awful this year as far as interceptions, much better the year before. They changed coaches, all the different things. But I mean, if there was an underneath coverage guy, he was throwing it to him this year. I mean, it was unbelievable to watch. I was like, okay, you make a few bad decisions, I get it. But it was like there were multiple times he didn't see linebackers who were in simple cover 3 drops.
Right. No, I know. And that's a big issue, because I feel like you can't take – that's why sometimes I go and I watch some of these quarterbacks turnover-worthy plays, because I get an idea of, are they just making boneheaded decisions, or is it just, a play that, hey, that's a football play, turnovers happen. But with Jordan Love, you see that a lot. And I think you're not going to be able to take that away. I mean, that's one thing, when I think of Tua, he's instinctual. Most of the time he's making good decisions. We've seen him today on a bunch of plays where he's making a pre-snap read. So he's quicker, and his base is always set up and good, and he's really quick twitch. And then there's some RPOs where he's making decisions after the snap. With Jordan Love, you see it sometimes, and that's why I go back to that uncatchable, inaccurate throw stat, is because he's at like 23% on throws, throwing 23% of uncatchable, inaccurate throws where guys are open and he should hit them. So I think, that's tough. And you can coach a little bit to make those decisions, but I kind of have, my major concern is what you're talking about, Cris, where there's a linebacker right there and you throw right to him, and it happens time and time again. That just sometimes you can't get rid of, like, a guy that makes boneheaded decisions more often than not.
Did anybody see Patrick Mahomes? Because Patrick Mahomes is going to make Jordan Love so much money because they're afraid that this young man is the next Patrick Mahomes and they're going to miss it, right? That's what the concern is if you're a GM and you don't take him.
But if you look at the underlying data, though, Mahomes' negatively graded play rate went from 20% as a sophomore, all the way down to 12, 13% by the time he was his final year at Texas Tech. So he kind of plays the part, right? They look the part, but the underlying fundamentals are drastically different between Mahomes and somebody like Jordan Love.
No, none of those big plays matter unless you can hit the plays that everyone else hits. And that's the thing about Mahomes. He even does that better than everybody else, basically, except for Drew Brees, right? I think that's the reason the Chiefs are so unstoppable.
there is the next Patrick Mahomes, right? Patrick Mahomes is breaking the league and is like he's
Jackson Mahomes.
the only one that's gone for the last 100 years. Like there's no new Patrick Mahomes the same way we're still waiting 20 years later for the next Randy Moss. Like it doesn't mean you take any crazy lunatic that runs a 4.2 and has off-field concerns. Like if you're waiting, like let's take a massively flawed quarterback prospect, because just like Mahomes, he has a big arm and does a lot of things out of structure. Like, okay, sure, but what about all of the other things that makes Mahomes Mahomes?
I've had this take on the podcast recently with Mike saying that arm strength is overvalued a bit, or arm talent is overvalued by kind of traditional evaluators and coaches because they fall into that cliche of they can make any throw on the football field and it only takes a couple throws to see it. You can be lazy and see a quarterback has arm strength. Seeing if they're accurate, seeing if they're consistent with decision making takes data, takes charting like PFF has done. And I think that hasn't happened until of late. It's been easy to see a 6'6" quarterback, easy to see a guy with a big arm. It's much harder to get an understanding if they're accurate, consistent decision making, all that stuff. It takes actual time and charting and comparing to other quarterbacks. I think you're just now starting to see accuracy valued in the same rate as arm talent.
Well, Gardner Minshew was one of the best downfield throwers in the league last year. He's got one of the worst arms. He was a 6th-round pick because he was accurate and on time. He was one of the better 10+ yard throwers.
But
Can a 6'6" guy be accurate? In other words, what I worry about is the longer your arm, the longer the motion, right? For me, we do a thing on Sunday night where you clock the release time. That would be one of my top. I've got to know what that is, because once somebody gets over 0.4 of a second on a release, they literally have no chance in my mind of playing in this league. If you're around 0.3 of a second, anywhere between 0.3 of a second or under, there's a couple under, but between that and about 0.35, okay, that's fine. Anything over 0.35 and anything, especially anything over 4. And I just wonder if those long arm guys just have a disadvantage.
Chris, do you have any names to like the long releases there? Do you know any offhand?
The Jacksonville quarterback.
Byron Leftwich.
Well, that's what I heard.
Leftwich was one, no question about it. Yeah.
Marcus Russell.
Tebow.
Bortles.
Well, Byron Leftwich had the historically slow one, right?
Yeah.
Randall Cunningham, 5 strip sacks a year because of it.
Randall Cunningham
focusing in on 9-inch hands when we should have been looking at arm length this whole time. I feel like that's the better measurement.
As a tall guy that did not throw balls accurately, it's difficult to get your body in sync. Yeah. You have to tie your footwork to your arm. And even in baseball, you see like tall pitchers might not peak until like 28, 29 years old.
Come on.
But like even like Jeff George had the quickest release in like NFL history. And he was 6'5". So it's not necessarily height. I think it's just.
Do you think it's that they can get away with it? So like if you're never forced to adapt, you skate by on athleticism for as long as you can. Well, and a lot of people praise that, right? They're like, oh my God, this guy is an athletic freak. And you're like, yeah, I am, right? Like I don't need to be the 6-foot guy that has the quickest release. But on the other side of that, I mean, Steve and I got a lecture, a lesson in quick releases from quarterback guru Jeff Christensen at the combine. And one of the funniest things is that's not alone good enough. It can be an eliminator, but like Christian Hackenberg, he got his release super quick. He still couldn't throw the ball in the ocean. So
he got it down really, really, really quick. He did.
He did. But but it helps if you can throw quickly and accurately, and you are forced to adapt earlier on in your career. Then you've got a shot. But if you're trying to make that change once you're already 22 and getting to the NFL level, it's so hard to do.
Well, that's a good point, George, because I remember specifically, I was a freshman at Toledo and we're playing Marshall, Byron Leftwich. And I remember him throwing a wheel route up the sideline. And when he released the ball, the running back was still in the flat and didn't even make it up the sideline yet. And I'm standing on the sideline where the ball got completed. And a running back ran right under it and caught it. And I just think you could get away with having an elongated release and stuff and slow delivery if you're smart enough. And I think that's why Byron Leftwich was able to, for some part and play a little while in the league. But, I look at Herbert. Herbert's a guy that he's just real methodical to me. And, even watching, of course, we watch him on film, but even like pro days and stuff, it's like a surgery he's performing, trying to complete a ball, like he's aiming the ball. I want to see a dude just react and let it rip. And that's what I see from Burrow and Tua so much.
So Bruce, how quick's your release?
Oh, it's a 0.3 guy.
Looking up to beat the Steelers at Heinz Field.
Let's jump off the quarterback conversation for a second here. Yes. Mike, I want to know. Leonard Fournette's on the trading block. Where would you rank him right now in this draft class? Where would you rank Leonard Fournette in this running back draft class?
Tied with A.J. Dillon. Same spot.
What rank is that for the people?
People were digging up receipts over you arguing with Fournette over McCaffrey.
Wait, Brenner, you were on Fournette over McCaffrey?
I said second round. I was lower on. I said both of them second round.
You were arguing that Fournette would be a more valuable player than McCaffrey based off the fact that he would touch the ball more as a ball carrier than McCaffrey if he was
a
third down back.
Mike, take off the damn hat. Take off the damn hat, Mike.
Fournette not in the first round.
Check the time. It could have been 2 in the morning. It could have been,
Nah, it could have been late night Renner. That could have been late night Ren.
I'm Twitter searching right now.
It may have been why he quit drinking for this show.
Yeah. Wow.
Eric, you brought up the forecast interview with Peter King earlier, and I feel like everyone should go listen to that because it's awesome. But you asked him, tell us something that you haven't told anyone yet. And he said Jalen Hurts is going to a team with a very good quarterback that believes in the Taysom Hill model. Steve, where does it make sense for Jalen Hurts to go, and what round do you think he's going in?
Jeez.
What the hell is the Taysom Hill model?
Well, see,
I don't know. I didn't even know what he meant by that.
A little bit on that. I checked Peter a little on that because I said, there's a difference, though, because Jalen Hurts may not be a great passer, but he's a passer.
Yeah.
So I know Mike and the draft, you guys are a little lower on him, and I get it, but he at least could be an NFL backup quarterback that throws the football more than 15 times, say, in their first 3-4 years in the league.
That would make him more dangerous than the Taysom Hill model, though. Like the issue with the Taysom Hill model is that there's never a threat of a throw. You're like, all right,
I will not take any Taysom slander on this chat.
He's going to the Saints then.
Drew Brees is out wide, and I've got Taysom Hill in the shotgun. I'm just petrified.
And Jalen Hurts on the field. He's going to New Orleans.
I like that. I like that a lot. Personally.
New Orleans. What about the Colts? What about the Colts with one of their 2 second-rounders? You have 1 more year. You have 1 year of Phillip Rivers.
That's a good call.
Literally the only team in the NFL that believes in the Taysom Hill model.
So he mentioned the Falcons as well, and that was very interesting because I feel like teams, it's a copycat league, right? The Saints have beaten up on the Falcons for a while, right? You're sitting there, you're like, okay, I've seen this happen time and time again, and we want to have that.
Can you give our Falcons a little bit more credit than that? I mean, if you look at the Falcons last 2 years and say the absence of some random third tight end who can throw the ball.
Yeah.
Stop. That's a slander.
Wait. How about the Ravens? I mean, if you're going to go all in on that style of play, and
they already have RG3.
They already have Trace McSorley. I mean, they're locked in. They're locked into the Taysom Hill model.
Accumulating QBs, though.
But they need more tight ends.
Hey, they do need more tight ends.
What if the Falcons are most rumored to be ready to trade up into the top 10 to get one corner? They're not our team if they're
What
doing
if the
that.
Saints drafted Hurts and then traded Hill to the Ravens to play tight end?
Wow.
I don't hate it.
So speaking of top 10s, Cris, you put out your mock draft today. And I need to know, we work hard here. Everyone here puts in the hours. And you have an interior defensive lineman, Derek Brown, in the top 10. Oh. And I'd like you to defend your position on how the hell you could possibly rationalize doing that.
Watch him play, I guess is what I would say. I mean, you got to fill every position before it's said and done. And the other thing is
in the top 10?
In the top 10. So do you not see, is there no Fletcher Cox at all in his game, in your mind?
I like the Akeem
Fletcher
Hicks
Cox
comp
ran a
lot.
4.79 coming out.
I like the Akeem Hicks comp.
6.
If you're going to compare him to an NFL player, like Akeem Hicks is a good comp, like a guy that could develop like later in his career to offer some upside as a pass rusher, but most likely is not going to be a good pass rusher most seasons. Better against
Lynn Val Joseph.
Or Lynn Val.
I think there'll be teams lined up. And the other thing about this guy is, and that I do try to do a lot of, is if I'm spending top 10 money on somebody, I want to see the guy. I want to meet him. I want to hear him interviewed. I want to hear what he's about. He was like one of those on-campus leaders. He was with every group. He was with, doing all the right stuff. If you're going to pay somebody that kind of money, and I'll tell you honestly what my real reasoning is. I think all of these offensive linemen are good. I don't think any of them are great. I think there's a chance they all end up players. I think the cornerbacks in this class are all good. I don't think any of them are great. I just don't. I think you look at the wide receivers, even the top 3, if they were great, we'd be talking about one of those guys going in the top 5. So I think you've got a big group of people that at the depth positions that are going to be they're good players. And it wouldn't surprise me, like if I gave you the top 3 receivers and you gave me the field, I'd almost be willing to bet I'd end up with more Pro Bowls than you would.
Okay. So that would be my point, though, is are you trying to accumulate the best players or the most valuable players? Because if Derek Brown is his best component is his run defense. So maybe he's great at run defense. But is it not more valuable to have even a slightly above average receiver or slightly above average corner or slightly above average offensive tackle who can impact the passing game? And maybe they don't make the Pro Bowl, but they get your team closer to winning a Super Bowl, which, I mean, look, and I know it's Jacksonville and they might hang banners for Pro Bowls, but, to me, that should be the way we're thinking about the draft instead of saying, okay, this guy could be great at his position. Even if it's not valuable.
I'm a huge fan of Fletcher Cox. I watch every time we do an Eagles game, we end up doing, I feel like, a quarter of the game showing his highlights because he's penetrating, he's getting up the field. You may think Kinlaw is going to end up being better, and he might be. That guy's had a rough life. He's been through a lot of different circumstances. He's got a lot of different things that he's overcome in his life. And sometimes those guys come out to be tremendous stories. But you also want to build a locker room around great players and great people. And that's the reason that I always thought Reggie White was among the greatest free agents of all time, because if you're going to pay somebody that kind of money and bring him into Green Bay, you want that personality. You want that guy that's going to be able to lead and do all those things right. And I think that's who Brown is.
Mike, look at Cris valuing the interviews. You make fun of me on the podcast for my love for the interviews. I'm telling you, they're important.
All right, let's get back to my Leonard Fournette takes.
That's the Cleveland Farrell. That's the Cleveland.
Hey, we're all vulnerable here, man. I'm just trying to. Plus, a little bit of me, I've got to admit. I mean, I try to read everything in sight that's going on with this draft. I've never seen anybody that is not taking Brown in the top 10. You know what I mean? Somebody's going to do it. I mean, there's just no
absolutely.
question.
Well, you're trying to predict too, right? You were trying to predict what Tim's going to do. So that's not you valuing him necessarily, right? It's you telling us what you think was going to happen, right?
A little bit of both. I mean, honestly, a little bit of both.
You're trying to give him a free pass here.
No. I don't need a free pass here. I think that he will. And a couple of the plays that he went sprinting 20, 25 yards down the field and go make a tackle. I mean, all the intangible stuff when you add it all up. And plus, I knew he's going to go in the top 10 anyway. So I said, I'm going to float that dude right in there to Jacksonville.
I think
there's a lot of rumors that those guys are going to go, right? That the league is going to go in the trenches, and this happens every year. We're going to be sitting there on Friday saying, can you believe these receivers and these cornerbacks and these safeties are still on the board heading into day 2, because guys that we definitely don't value as much are going to go off the board in round 1. I think it's
and the scarcity of the inside guys too. I think I think there's a ton of good edge players. I think there's a ton of good players in this draft. I think there are potentially 2, maybe 3, potentially 4 great players that I could, I think Okudah has a chance. I'm not positive about, him being great. Simmons, I think, my concern with Simmons even is what is it? Eventually he's got to play something. Yeah. So is he one of the top slot corners in the league? No. Is he one of the top safeties in the league? No. Is he one of the top inside linebackers in the league? No. So, I mean, he's going to play somewhere. Yeah, I love the versatility, and he's going to be able to do that. But where was it that you saw him play on the field that you go, oh, boy, there he is. That's a top 3 guy at that position.
Michael?
I mean, if he's at linebacker, he's a top 3 coverage linebacker. Like, he never played there is the thing. But if he did, he would have the best coverage, like some of the best coverage skills in the NFL.
But we haven't seen it. You know what I mean? So that's my concern across the board. I mean, if Jerry Jeudy was the greatest receiver of all time, he'd be going in the top 5. If Henry Ruggs were in that category, we'd be talking about him. I think CeeDee Lamb has a chance to be that. I think his catch and run ability is much more about what the NFL is right now than the 4-2-7. But I do think he fits the 49ers. I do think that Ruggs fits the 49ers perfectly.
Mike, I want the Fournette takes. Give us the Fournette takes.
Fournette takes. All right, coming out. I cannot, on April 10th, 2017, I cannot.
What time? What time? The time matters.
That was well before the draft. I cannot fathom how in this day and age Leonard Fournette is getting top 5 hype. On draft day, he gets drafted. I tweet, I almost just cried on camera after that Fournette pick. Had to compose myself. This was on March 2nd of that year. Leonard Fournette, hashtag not my running back. This was an article. When watching the film, there's a legitimate reason there's a worrisome discrepancy talking about how when he had bad blocking, his yards per carry stunk. Fournette has little to no patience. Fournette has one speed when he runs, and if that one speed is taking him to a hole that's not there, he has difficulty adjusting course. Because of this, I wouldn't want him anywhere near his own scheme.
Can we pause, though? Mike's taking a victory lap over saying a running back in the first round isn't going to work out. Well,
I'm not taking a victory lap.
Minus 1,000.
I was falsely accused. I was falsely accused of.
Hey, Eric.
Thank God.
Eric, what do you think teams will make the biggest mistake during the draft? Do they go like drafting for their needs instead of value?
Following Chris's mock.
Do not talk about Derek Brown.
We already answered that question.
He won't be the
No,
most.
I think honestly, a big mistake will be the team that trades up for an offensive lineman. Because I just think people are like, to Chris's point, I think the curve is a lot flatter. I don't think it's the huge drop off, and there's going to be some team that thinks that they're a tough tackle away from being Tampa Bay. There's a team that thinks that they're an offensive tackle away, and they don't, and they think that the differential between Mekhi Becton and Andrew Thomas or something like that is huge. So,
I mean, does anybody feel really strongly among? I put 5 linemen in there. I know everybody else is putting 3 or 4.
No, the Vegas the line says 7.
Yeah,
7 offensive
really?
In the first
Austin
round?
Jackson and Ezra Cleveland and Isaiah Wilson might go.
I don't doubt it.
The current betting line is 6.5, juiced way to the over.
Okay,
there,
all right.
There are guys we have value in the third.
Let me just put it this way: does anybody feel like if you got, whichever the order is, do you feel so strongly about one of the guys in this draft being that guy that you want to move up or trade up? Or if you're the Giants, you want to pick that guy. I mean, to me, that's the hardest part of these receivers and these offensive linemen is that I think they're all good. But I just don't think anybody has distinguished themselves to the point where it's like, I got to go get that guy in the top 7, 8 players in the draft.
Well, that's why if you look at like the props and stuff, it went from Wirfs being the first lineman was the favorite. Then it's Wills now. There's some support for Mekhi. Like, I think to your point, I think that's why we're seeing so many different players being mocked as the first lineman taken, because it's not. I think it's a scheme fit thing. I mean, the guys that know more about football could tell me that, but Like Mekhi Becton probably fits really well in with the Browns, with their running, zone running scheme, but might not fit in with another team. So it might even just depend on who the team is.
There isn't an offensive tackle ranked inside the top 5 on PFF's board, and all the tackles are very close. So I would agree, Cris, with the overall idea that like the tackles are all very close. I would not be trading up for any one of them, but there is a significant drop off after Josh Jones. Like if you're going into the second round, third round for like those type of tackles, I think the first 4 tackles on PFF's board, there's a drop off significantly after those guys.
But that's exactly why you don't. That's exactly why you don't trade up.
Well, and that's why I think like if you want a safe bet, like who's the most likely team to trade down in this draft, I think it's Cleveland. I think, and it's because they're probably not going to get the best tackle. They need one. They're pretty analytically savvy, and they know the fact that if they trade into the 20s or something, they're still going to get a guy that they want.
Here's a question I have. A couple years ago, there was the Browns guardrails leaked out there, and I think Paul DePodesta, who's there and analytically sound, to your point, I think put them together. And one of their things, their guardrails that they just live by, is never pass on a blue, as in never pass on a blue chip player. Any idea how far does that go? Does that include blue chip running backs? Does that include blue chip?
Derek Brown?
There is no such thing.
Is Derek Brown in there?
There's no such thing as a blue chip running back.
But like that's more the Chase Young debate at the top. Like there's a high certainty level that what you're going to get from Chase Young. Versus, say, a corner, there's less certainty, even if, Okuda is an excellent prospect. I think it's a great debate.
If Chase Young's available at 10, I would take him.
They would take him. Yeah, I would take him. Well, it's also why in a draft that ended up with Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, they stayed pat and took Myles Garrett. I think it's pretty consistent with their
take the blue.
It was pretty consistent with the take the blue thing. I don't think there's a blue chipper at 10 in this draft. I think every single player has context surrounding them by the time you get to 10.
I'm not necessarily talking about 10. I'm just saying as a concept, I think it's an interesting one.
Let me ask one other question here, because this one's bugging me too. So the cornerbacks, all right, let's say that we all agree that Okuda is a top 10 player. We may not, but if, of those next guys, are you convinced that Christian Fulton and CJ Henderson are that guy? I mean, I'm a Florida Gator guy, and I always heard about C.J. Henderson. I was so disappointed watching him play this year. I thought that, if a guy ran a crossing route or that he was like just took plays off and he wouldn't tackle Christian Fulton. I think he's a solid player, but I don't know that, as far as I'm stuck in limbo between which of these classes of athletes, the wide receivers, the tackles, and these cornerbacks, which is, sort of where the depth is here. And you got to factor that in too, because you're going to get a pretty good player down the road here. Which one of those guys do you pound the table for and go, oh yeah, that's my first round guy? If you're Dallas, I have to have one of those. I'm moving up to 12 to get Fulton or Henderson. Do we really think one of those two guys are that good?
I think a big reason why there's a ton of cornerbacks that are high on PFF's board is because you are factoring in positional value. Because like you said, Christian Fulton, solid player. A solid player at cornerback is very, very valuable. And there's the same with a solid player at like C.J. Henderson. If he turns out to be a solid cornerback, and solid cornerbacks have first-round value, and there are a handful in this class that you should value like that way. I think that's a big reason why Trayvon Diggs is in the top 32. Jalen Johnson is in the top 32. Are those guys going to be great players? Are the range of outcomes, is that likely? No, but they have a very good chance of being solid players, and being solid at cornerback is more valuable than being solid at interior offensive line, among other like less valuable positions.
Well, then why isn't the league making a move towards Vic Fangio style defenses where it doesn't matter so much? Its corners are so valuable that you've got to move them up the board so far to make that kind of a difference, because you can play a defense where you don't have to have cornerbacks to make it work.
I mean, I think it's relatively few and far between though, and those defenses end up being pretty unstable year to year. Yeah, I mean, you can do what Kansas City did this year.
I was going to say your Chiefs won a world championship without a.
But Indianapolis deployed the same thing in 2018, and it kind of caught up to them in 2019. I agree. To Austin's point, like take Denzel Ward, who's taken 4th overall just 2 years ago. Denzel Ward hasn't turned out to be Deion Sanders. He hasn't turned out to even be Darius Slay, but he's been a solid contributor to Cleveland. And that pick's successful because that secondary is pretty good and pretty, anti-fragile to a lot of things that have happened to that team. Like that's kind of, I don't think you need brilliance at the corner position, but you need at least 4 or 5 guys who can be passable.
Fangio's had solid guys. Fangio's had more like underappreciated, like Prince Amukamara types. Prince Amukamara has had, like, you talk about Jalen Johnson or an AJ Terrell. Like if you give them Prince Amukamara's career, where he's like a 70 PFF grade every year, like that's a very good, valuable player. And that's
Brandon, they just released Amukamara. Is Amukamara still on the team?
They did. The whole league's been undervaluing him since he came in. He's bounced around to 4 or 5 different teams, but he's
probably the interviews. Probably the interviews could be
probably that.
I don't know. We could bring that up.
I mean, let's not. I think Cris actually makes a fantastic point here with the Chiefs as an example. They have the best quarterback in the league. If you're trading up and it's not for a quarterback, throw your draft in the garbage. You've made a massive mistake. I mean, that is a ridiculous mistake. Do not trade up unless you are getting a position that can actually transcend and change your franchise. And that's one position. Otherwise, stand pat or trade back. Play the probability of picking more players, be humble, and understand that average at valuable positions is more important than greatness at not so valuable ones. And that I think is a hard thing to wrap your head around. But if you can get an average corner and you can get average coverage play, that is tremendously valuable. The Kansas City Chiefs did that. And then it took them from, okay, we couldn't stop anybody to we can stop people just enough for our generational quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
Then they let Kendall
a lot of
Fuller
money
go.
on Tyrann Mathieu. And and they traded their starting quarterback for Kendall Fuller and like all that kind of, like there are moves they made in that direction. But I agree with you. I think we overvalue top end. I mean, it's like, when Dallas traded up for Morris Claiborne, it was a bad decision because they consolidated all their risk in the secondary into one player. That's not a good recipe for success. But if you spread your risk out among a bunch of talented players, chances are you're going to have a pretty good secondary.
Have we started to move a little bit in the direction of where real value is? And really what Kansas City did great was they had safeties that could also cover. Mm-hmm. So in other words, you don't always have to go into a nickel package, that you're not getting beat by some of those tight ends flexing out, running backs as receivers kind of looks.
Yeah, I think having safety / corner / linebacker hybrids is awesome. I mean, the Ravens took Earl Thomas, who's just one of the best free safeties of all time, and they deployed him like a strong safety. They put him closer to the line of scrimmage. They have their safeties playing linebackers. I loved what the Chiefs did, grabbing Juan Thornhill, former corner, playing safety, Tyrann Mathieu, slot corner who could play safety, having Fuller moving around. But I think what the Chiefs did is instead of they were playing more man coverage than anybody the year before, and they couldn't cover. All they needed to do last year, they played a little bit more zone, game planned a little bit more, and just survived, like George said, so that Mahomes could go win. So I think the zone-heavy strategy can work, especially if you have an offense that just, you just have to survive out there. Don't give up 35 every game.
Yeah, but they did great disguise stuff, and that's the same thing as a Fangio defense, that the disguise are constant, they're subtle, there's little movements within there, and so that can be schemed a little bit as long as across the board, you've got people that can pick up those running backs or tight ends that otherwise are slot receivers that are so difficult to match up and figure out what they're trying to do to you too.
Well, and it's also probably fleeting, right? I think you can get away with doing stuff like that for 10 to 20 games. I would imagine that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to go into this draft saying we have to get a linebacker who can actually cover. We have to get a cornerback who's better than Bashaud Breeland. But in the pinch, absolutely, those are great. I mean, it's a lot like the Ravens offense 2 years ago. If you give me Lamar Jackson, I'm going to build an offense where we predominantly run. But if you give me an entire offseason, I'm going to build an offense that's more stable, that requires him to throw as much as he runs. And
also, like, the whole thing is contingent on Mahomes, right? Like, the Chiefs' defense was still not good. It was just good enough that Mahomes was able to win a Super Bowl with it. Like, you can't do that if your quarterback is Kirk Cousins. The Vikings did a nice job patching up with same deal, right?
Is there anything you can do, Sam, if your quarterback is Kirk Cousins?
But like you bring up the Chiefs because they obviously won the Super Bowl. We look at teams that were also very close. Like Adoree Jackson, the Tennessee Titans had like a very good postseason run. Was one of the most highest graded players in the postseason. Baltimore Ravens with Marlon Humphrey, Earl Thomas. I mean, they
Marcus
had
Peters.
Marcus Peters, like a ton of cornerback talents.
Yeah.
Patriots had the best defense in football last year, a historically great defense with a ton of good coverage players. The McCourty brothers, Stephon Gilmore. J.C. Jackson has turned out to be a gem. I really do. Mike, you're awful quiet over there. Talk to me about this cornerback class. Talk to me about why so many of them are ranked inside the top 32.
I just think it's deep in guys who have been good in college. I don't like.
What is your problem? What?
There's just a lot of good ones.
That's your job.
So 21 to 23 years ago, they were all born. Do you want me to walk you through their lives up to this?
No, but this is a good question. I was going to ask you this, Mike. So how many guys are you confident are the best at their position? So, like, you're confident Burrow's the best quarterback, right?
Okay.
You're confident Chase Young is the best edge defender.
Are you saying are or will be? Or like, I guess.
Are very confident.
Is that not the same?
I mean, you can be good, the best right now and not the best in like 2 years.
Will be the best in the NFL, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And it seems to me like there is more, conversation. The running back, the receivers, the corners, the offensive tackles. There's a lot of discussion. So I'm curious from your standpoint. Like you have Okudah 1, right? You have, you have Jerry Jeudy 1. But what's your confidence level like? Because I think this is a good litmus test for you're going into the draft. Just because you're slightly more confident that this guy's going to be better than this guy doesn't mean that you trade up for him.
Yeah, so like Chase Young is probably the only guy who like I'd put a pin in and be like he is and will be the best. After that, probably the next most confident I feel would be Jeffrey Okudah will be the best in the NFL as respective position. After that, gosh.
Burrow?
Yeah, probably Burrow would be after that because I think there's just not a lot of the quarterbacks and like he feels fairly safe.
Isaiah Simmons, depending on where you call him, position.
I don't even know about Isaiah Simmons. There's like a lot of good linebackers is the kind of the problem there. But yeah, probably Isaiah. Man, I don't know. It gets really shaky after that.
That's for me too. That's exactly my feeling through this whole draft is that do I really think that we're going to get so much better play from CJ Henderson than we're going to get from AJ Terrell? And I would go, I'm not so sure he's even better than AJ Terrell. If you gave it to me right now, I would take Terrell or however he says that.
Well, you're making a great case for trading down then, right? I mean, if you
for sure.
If you have no clue or you're not very confident, then, trade back and give yourself some more confidence in the currency of draft picks than anything.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, we have argued a lot about the receivers, and sure, we all have our favorites. You could not pay me to trade up for the guy that I have first. I'm not.
Agreed. That's my point exactly. I totally agree with that.
So that's why I think this draft is perfect for teams that have wide receiver needs. The Colts, the Raiders, maybe the Packers double up at wide receiver.
Yes.
Certain teams can double up at corner. I love that as a concept. Mitigate that risk. The Packers did it a couple of years ago at corner, and they've done it a few times through the years at corner. I just love that as a strategy. I think a bunch of teams are primed to do it with receivers this year.
Do you think there's almost a feeling like I got to come out of the draft with a piece of everything? Like I got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's like, no, man, if you really just want to go all in on the steak, just come out with that, right? You don't need to go and get yourself one of these and one of these. And if you really need coverage, you need to understand that you're not going to hit on the guy that you like most all the time. So you've got to be willing to go in and say, okay, I really need to add to my receiving core. I'm going to take 3 receivers. And you got to be cool with that.
So how does that play back into the quarterback position? So let me just phrase this. So I think to some extent we've got a little agreement. There may be 3, you may argue 4 if Simmons, you want to put Simmons in that the blue chip category of that. But now if you've got Tua, who at least at the beginning of the year would have been a blue chip player. Can we all sort of agree with that? That going into this season, we had him as a blue chip player. So now at that point, if you've got him and you have that kind of faith, I'm either trying to trade down and get the heck out of there, or does Tua jump into that top 3, 4, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 players that are the blue chips that I am willing to go up to get Or am I just playing I'm trying to get out all day?
Well, I think that's where you look at the difference between the probabilities and the payoff. Like for every player except for a quarterback, the payoff is pretty limited, right? But then for quarterbacks, though, if you hit on the 80th percentile, the 70th percentile, the payoff is enormous. And I think that's really where like you trade a little confidence for some variance in that situation and just say, look, like I'm not super confident that Tua is going to be even a starting caliber quarterback in the league, but my fundamentals think that there's a 25% chance he's a Pro Bowl quarterback or whatever, an All-Pro or Super Bowl winning quarterback. Then I think that's really the only position. There's defensive end is not that position. It's not like, well, 20% of the time Chase Young's taking me to the Super Bowl. That like never happens. But for quarterback, I think that's a different calculation because.
So if you're Detroit, right? Shouldn't somebody at this point? Because I think Chase Young will stay at Washington. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think he'll stay there. If you're Detroit, aren't you now in a perfect position because there's so much additional value at the quarterback position that even if you only have a 50% confidence that Tua is still going to be what we thought he was at the beginning of the year, shouldn't you be making that move?
Yes. And I said
that's what we say.
I said they should be. And it's like the idea that you wouldn't understand how valuable that asset is just because you don't need one this instant. Like just because I have one diamond doesn't mean that I go, you know what? I don't want this other one. Like
I mean, there's a really good chance Detroit's going to be terrible.
Watched match.
Well, but that's the trade-off. So Chase Young, maybe you can make the argument this is a generational player. Are we anywhere close to making that for Okudah? He's at the most valuable position on defense. So should we be saying, okay, really we should be talking about 4 in the Giants is where somebody should be coming up?
The tough thing, though, with coverage, and Eric has studied this, and this is, I think, my favorite article that I've read of his, and he has a lot, is talking about how defense and coverage in particular, it's not a star-driven facet. You have to be solid. And at the quarterback position, it's a totally different story, right? Passing is a one-position game. And so you can change your team from 4 wins to 10 wins with one position on the quarterback position. You can't do that anywhere else. So even though Okudah might be a top 5 corner, that still doesn't get you there. And so that's why that payoff for Tua is so valuable and why you have to be willing, even if you have a guy that you're going to start next year in Matt Stafford, to say, I'm going to take the most valuable asset.
Well, is that why if you're the Redskins, though, do you not even entertain the chance of Tua? I mean, I know you're sitting there staring at Chase Young, but you're looking at your quarterback room too.
I mean, you do. You absolutely do. I mean, the thing is just like, let's say each quarterback has a 0.5%, 50% chance of hitting. The probability that either or hits is 75%. So you take your chances of getting a franchise quarterback and increase it by 50. Like it's a huge play, and especially if the jury is still out on Haskins. I mean, the jury is you're kind of making a similar argument with Detroit in the sense that you're probably 50-50 on whether Stafford can get you there the rest of his career.
What Eric is saying is this: you either get Haskins and Chase Young together, and you have to stick with Haskins no matter what he is, or you get either Haskins or Tua, the better of the two. And the better of the two, because it's at the quarterback position, gains you so much more value that it's even more valuable than having Chase Young. And that is crazy to think about.
Tua's hands down better than Haskins, right?
If he's
the injury is what kind of throws it all. Because I mean, if the injury, I'd be scared to trade up for Tua Tagovailoa with the injury. Like it's literally a situation the NFL has not encountered, like from a severity standpoint with that injury. Like it's catastrophic.
But what if
like
the Dodgers?
If the question is though, if the Washington Redskins get below average quarterback play or worse for the next 5 years, how much is Chase Young going to move the needle for them?
It's not. I agree. It's not.
Chicago Bears.
I don't think it is, but it's like I think the Washington Redskins would be smart to take a flyer on Tua Tagovailoa at 2.
The Redskins, there's no way the Redskins can do that. There's no way. If they pass on Chase Young, they are going to get crushed. And their ownership is the one that made the move on the quarterback last year. I just don't see it. I don't think they can. I don't think emotionally they can do it.
Let me ask you this, because Cris, you talk to these people more often than any of us by a large margin. The truly transcendent people in our country, in our world, make decisions that people criticize at first, but that they believe in, and if they believe in them, the fundamentals are right, they ultimately pay off, and people go, "Oh my God, I can't believe we thought this guy was an idiot." In the NFL, that seems to be that doesn't happen that often. Why is that? These are all smart guys, right? They've made a lot of money in other places, but it seems like that type of entrepreneurial spirit doesn't happen as much.
Because they don't want, even if you're Jerry Jones and you own the team, think of how much stuff you've heard and you've read about him as the GM, right? That's the reason the Cowboys haven't won another Super Bowl, because he took over for Jimmy Johnson as the true GM and blah, blah, blah. It's all that stuff. I just don't think Dan Snyder right now can afford to not take Chase Young. There is an emotional element to this game. Chase Young has been portrayed, even by us, as the best player in this draft, physically, with what he can do, a non-quarterback, whatever the case may be. I just think they would boo him out of the stadium at this point. If he took Tua and Tua ended up being hurt and never played, they would almost force him to sell the team at that point.
I also have a take on that.
I'm in DC. I'm in DC right now. I can tell you that's already happening.
Part of it, though,
I know.
The reason I think is that us as fans, or us as media people, or us as analysts, our objective is totally different than, I think, head coaches, owners. I mean, they're trying to stave off long-term ruin, which is basically, the method for doing that is to fail with the crowd, right?
Which is also why a lot of these guys actually tell the truth with the media before the draft, because they want some positive stuff written about the guy they're about to take, which is what is really confusing about all the stuff before the draft.
You have to take those risks, like that you brought up, the entrepreneurial spirit. Take those risks if you're going to meet your long-term goal of being super successful. In the NFL, you don't. If you just take the players everyone wants you to take, you'll be owning that team forever. Like Chase Young, that's what everyone wants. Will keep doing it. Their goals are not necessarily to win football games. Their goals are to continue to make money at a very high rate.
Yeah. It's crazy.
That's the disconnect. That's the disconnect with ownership and coaches. You think Matt Patricia, he's sitting there with the Lions. Yeah, take Tua. He sits behind Matthew Stafford. You transition into the next phase when Stafford's done. But that's not going to keep Matt Patricia, his job. So he wants the best player.
But also, it's not like it's a one-to-one thing, right? You take Tua, you maximize your potential, and you're immediately 5 times better than if you didn't take him. They're sitting there going, well, there's still a pretty good chance that Dwayne Haskins, the guy we like all along, is still going to be as good as Tua down the road. And we've done the whole thing without me having to look like a moron and reverse my decision a year later to get another guy and double my chances. It's not, one or the other. They're still thinking that all you're doing by doing it the other way is changing the percentages and maximizing your chance.
Yeah. But that's like saying you want 1 lottery ticket instead of 2.
But that's the tricky part. So knowing what we know about what we feel about, say, Kyler Murray or Baker Mayfield, right? If Arizona was sitting there at 2, we believed in Kyler. We were at the forefront of saying, get rid of Rosen, trade for Kyler, trade up or pick Kyler, right? If Arizona had number 2, would we be encouraging them to go get Tua, or would we have even more confidence that, hey, our prior thoughts on Kyler are strong, we're good, grab Chase Young?
If Kyler played like Dwayne Haskins last year, hell yeah. But Kyler looked great. Kyler looked good.
Here's the thing, though. The answer is not take Chase Young. The value in that pick is that you can get a quarterback. Trade down. Yeah. Because if you don't trade down, you haven't maximized the value that a quarterback can bring you, which is basically you get a pick 2 picks later and another first. So that is a sin of omission that people often just wipe under the rug. That Giants fans certainly have wiped under the rug. That should not be, because it's a missed opportunity to improve your team.
There's only 2 ways to get more than 1 player per pick, and that's to trade it or to draft a quarterback.
Guys, we're going to do this basically tomorrow night. We've got the draft show. Come hang out with us. We're going to be on YouTube, on Twitter. We're going to start at 7. It's going to be a lot of fun. Get your draft guide. If you don't have one already, you need it to follow along. I need it. Everyone here needs it. They're going to have it open the entire time. It's awesome. Play with the mock draft simulator. Did I miss anything? I think that's
promo code draft. Promo code draft 2020 saves you 30% off on any annual sub. If you don't have your draft guide, you can get it for $7. That's simple as that. Simple as that.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Peace out.